following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Northern California, right across the bay from San Francisco. I'm in Alameda, California, and right across the moat from Oakland, as a matter of fact. So it's a little island town in the East Bay. Not so much a well-kept secret anymore. Prices have gone up commensurate with the rest of the Bay Area. But it is beautiful. We get a much better weather than San Francisco, and it's a town. You can walk around, you get stores, and you shop. It's atypical of California, which is basically a freeway state. So you could live here and not have to drive, and it's wonderful. But that's my story, and it was 71 degrees as I went for the phone today, and it's the evening, so can't complain at all. What I'd like to know is what's the weather like in Matthew Dibiase's life, because he's my returning guest, one of the most interesting people on the face of the planet, a Renaissance man. And you getting a lot of rain, Matthew?
Oh yeah, more than our fair share. It's got to be the wettest, hottest summer I've seen in a long, long time. We've had more goose drowners in the city of brotherly love than I can ever remember. Man, it's wet and it's hot right now, very hot. 95
Whoa.
In my area.
Well, you know what I found out today? Speaking of Philadelphia, the Army-Navy store is closing. I don't know if you know that store. I'll bet you do. After 100 years of existence. So it's a sign of our brick and mortar businesses going down the tubes, and I think that's a big problem. Another big problem is the shootings. You had one in your city. What was that about? What precipitated that? And how does that fit in with gun control?
It was the police executing a warrant. I think the guy was a dope dealer, and they were going to serve a warrant on him for narcotics charges. The guy had amassed an arsenal, and he was not going to go quietly, and he proceeded to, he was a one-man army, and he started shooting. 6 police officers were wounded, taken to hospital, and were treated and released. No fatalities, thank God.
Miraculously, no fatalities. That was the beautiful part. And the real kicker is they didn't kill him. They took him alive. I wonder how that happened.
They just started sealing off the perimeter. They just started getting the press and the people back, securing the perimeter, because the guy had long guns. So they had to push the perimeter back to make sure that people were out of the quote-unquote effective range of those long guns. And then they got the negotiator in. And I wasn't. This thing was settled in the wee small hours of the morning after I'd gone to bed. But basically, what I gathered is that they got the Philadelphia District Attorney, Mr. Krasner. I think they got. Was it the PD or something? The Philadelphia City PD's office or something like that. It was like a 4-way conference. You had the police commissioner and you had the perpetrator. And they just basically negotiated the surrender. In other words, I'm not going to be shot. I'm not going to get beaten. And then finally, he gave it up, came out with his hands over his head, and surrendered quietly. But, I mean, this went on for hours because I think the thing started like 4 p.m., and it was like I think it was around after midnight that he finally came out and gave it all up. But, I mean, all of northern Philadelphia was basically under lockdown there, but I wasn't even close to the action. People were kind of asking me, Matt, are you okay? Nah, This was in North Philly. I live in Northeast, so I wasn't even remotely close to it.
This is right by Temple, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Kind of in that general area, because that's where Temple University is in northern Philadelphia. In that general vicinity, yeah.
Harrowing times.
Yeah.
What do you make of the NRA controlling Congress, in particular the Republican senators, and when will be enough for the voters to say we can't be represented by these people? This is ridiculous.
I know. I'm going to be perfectly blunt, Ralph. I consider the NRA to be a subversive organization. I mean, when you consider what they've done the past 20 years since, let's start with Columbine, that absolutely nothing has been done to restrain this violence. Thanks to the NRA's efforts, nothing has been done to curb these weapons. The fact that, in fact, access to these weapons of mass destruction have been enhanced, not suppressed, enhanced, made even easier to get these types of weapons. And basically what has happened with all these massacres has flown in the face their assertion, we need more guns to make sure these things don't happen. The fact is these things continue to happen, and they're increasingly happening, which basically refutes their central thrust. I consider what the NRA has done is just basically co-opted the GOP and basically have subverted democracy as we know it. Because they have backed. Yeah, go ahead, Ralph. Yeah, go ahead.
And it's the president that acquiesces because he and McConnell and the head of the NRA, if they sat down, they could come up with something, anything to appease us, as it were. It wouldn't take much. Or I don't understand why they can't have quantitative testing, at least. If you're not going to give up the guns, at least start with testing, background testing, to see if these people are deserving of carrying an assault weapon. What do you say to the absurdity of that? That you have to, that everybody wouldn't just order, of course you have to have testing, but I don't want to give up my gun. Right? Who would say no testing? What's the purpose behind that to the NRA? What do they give a rat's ass? It would be good publicity for them if they could say, you should test you should have background tests because ... What do you think?
I don't know. I'm just as flummoxed by it as you are. To my mind, the fact that the NRA, in the wake of these massacres, keeps demanding like school children be given mandatory gun training and all that, to my mind, it kind of reeks like imperialistic Japan. At a very early age, children were exposed to the samurai spirit. In other words, they're engaging in military activities, mock dog fights, mock, samurai sword fights. Basically, where do you get the spirit of, the Bataan Death March and the rape of Nanking? It was taught to Japanese children at a very, very early age. And I think it's the same mentality here. It's like the Hitler Youth being exposed to paramilitary training at a very early age, and all of that. It's that conditioning them to kill, conditioning them to hate. In other words, it's easy to teach, teaching them to kill. Basically, it's so easy to take a life. Don't think of it as human. Think of it as just a mere target, that dehumanization of what it is you're aiming at and encouraging it. And then you combine it with today's video games where you can single-handedly win World War III, and you can rack up an incredible body count. And also the idea of YouTube where if I just kill enough people, I can immortalize myself forever, on Instagram and YouTube and all that. Killers going into Walmarts wearing their own video cameras so they can videotape their own massacres. In a sense, it's becoming a sick thing. In other words, the only way I can have impact is by committing mass murder. That's the only way I can have any meaning in life, any type of impact. How can someone remember? Simply, I butchered innocent people, and the bigger my kill ratio is, the more I get remembered. And it's sickness. It's sickness. It's dehumanizing human life. There's no culture anymore.
I've always had this thing where you don't blame the person, you blame the parents, the upbringing, or the lack of parental influence, this, that, and the other thing. Where has lack of respect for life, for human life, just for living to life, that kind of thing, where it isn't given that you're going to be 80, you got to work at it, that sort of thing. Not everybody makes it, so the way we were raised, you had to respect it because everybody didn't have long life. And now it doesn't seem to matter. I mean,
I know.
Kids are at a point where it's either no supervision, or what I think it is because there's zero unemployment. That's great, but you can't work one job. A family has to have at least two workers working, and for the most part, one of them working a part-time job in addition to just be able to afford to live in today's day and age, now that the unions were busted by Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
So a job, so what? A job. You know, that they act like that's a big thing. That if you're the working poor, and I quote, they call them the working poor, that has to be a real bad sign at times, that there are people going to work and they work 40 hours and they can't afford to take care of business, can't afford to buy a house.
Yeah. But there's another aspect, Ralph. I think you're seeing I think what has existed for quite some time in our society is we're a retaliatory society. The encouragement of retaliation. You see it in TV shows. You see it in movies. Someone did me wrong. I have to retaliate. And the only way that can do it with finality is use a weapon, use a gun. Where's my gun? You know, someone cut me off in traffic. I reach for my gun, and and you do a drive-by shooting and all that. Some minority took my job. I want to retaliate. Where's my gun? Go into an African-American church or a synagogue and shoot it up or something like that. If you look at these things, it's always retribution, retaliation. I got downsized, and so I go to some area, and I just shoot it up. Someone has to die because something bad happened to me. I must retaliate. In other words, instead of taking negative energy and converting into something positive and try to find something good, it's basically you're destroying others, but at the same time you're destroying yourself in a sense. And it's just society, a retributive society, a retaliatory society. We have to retaliate.
Should it be reaching down to school-age kids at that point? Why are they so bitter? I understand that over a lifetime you could build up a lot of hatement and resentment. If you don't get therapy for that, that's a burden in itself to go through life with. But for a 16, 17-year-old kid to be that angry, I wonder where that comes from. And
I think it's a lack of. You could say a lack of reading, a lack of also a clear-cut sense of right and wrong. Let me tell you a story, Ralph, based on my own personal experience. I was an extremely bullied child in childhood, from the age of 8 to the age of 18. When I was going to school in the Delran, New Jersey school system, I was subjected to constant physical, psychological, verbal abuse at the hands of my classmates and the teachers and the faculty of that school system. At the same time, though, I went through a lot of pain, but at the same time, the idea of taking a gun and mass murdering my classmates or the teachers in my school system never ever occurred to me because, one, I lived in a household where there were no guns, okay? First and foremost, there were no guns in my household. Two.
May I ask how old you are, Matthew?
I just turned 56 years old.
So we're going back to a time that even if there were guns, it wouldn't be assault rifles available.
No.
To you.
No.
Like when I grew up, the biggest I saw a zip gun once. A kid named Luke, who was known in the neighborhood as a JD, a juvenile delinquent, showed me a zip gun once.
Yeah.
That's the only firearm I saw growing up.
Right.
So a kid you wouldn't have had the mindset of taking your anger out in such a dramatic way because it wasn't available. And that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Go try it with a knife, do that sort of thing. If you're a perpetrator, do the best you can. But how about a magazine that fires off 100 shots in 9 seconds? That sort of thing.
Yeah. And again, back to my thing, because when it started at age 8, that was 1971, and I graduated from high school in 1982. So that's the time period that I'm talking about. But also, Ralph, I also knew that to do a thing like that, let's say I had access to a weapon, the idea of taking life like that, simply because I was in pain. I mean, I did not like violence, Ralph. I was a very sensitive child. I did not like the idea of anyone getting hurt at all. Not just me, but the idea of me hurting others, basically reducing myself to the level of those who were bullying me, was also equally repugnant. And that's what you don't see in today's society. In a sense, there's that temptation to be like the ones who are bullying you. In other words, you're bullying them back, but this time you've got the bigger weapon. You've got the assault rifle. In that sense. And that's the mentality that is destroying us today. In other words, instead of taking that negative energy and trying to create something beautiful out of it, because I took my pain and I became a writer. Writing saved my life. Because if I didn't have my writing, I think I would have gone insane, Ralph, or also I would have taken my own life. But no, I took the negative energy and converted it into artistic power. And it basically liberated and treated myself psychologically through my writing in that sense. And it's
cathartic to you in the same way that podcasting is cathartic to me.
Yes. I mean, but there's no teaching children, you're in pain. I know you're in pain. Let's find something beautiful to convert that pain into something beautiful. Make something beautiful. Don't make something ugly or murderous or evil out of your pain. Take pain and convert it into something good. Take it and make a piece of art, like a painting or a poem or a song, or take part in acting.
Let me, Matthew, drop in on your life. What project do you have going right now that you can tell us about?
I'm putting the finishing touches to my third book titled Lords of the Gridiron, College Football's Greatest Coaches. It will be released on September 1st on Amazon. You can buy it online at Amazon. It's a book where it's kind of like a Bill James type thing. I developed a rating system where I took all the Division 1A college football coaches from the 19th century up to the present time with at least 10 years coaching experience, put them through my rating system, and I determined who the 50 greatest college football coaches of all time are. And it features basically most of the obvious greats, men like Bear Bryant, John McKay.
Lonzo Stagg, maybe?
When you buy it, you'll find out. I don't want to give the game away too much, but it covers basically every corner of America here. All the major college football programs from Alabama to Penn State to Michigan, Ohio State, USC.
Oh,
wow. Every corner of the country is covered, from the University of Texas to Oklahoma. We cover the waterfront, Clemson, the Ivy League, because over 100 years ago, the Ivy League was that's where you wanted to see great college football. Go to the Ivy League.
Army Navy was top-notch football back in the day.
Yeah.
That's not Ivy League, but military league as well. I remember as a kid going out to Columbia, Bakersfield, and watching Columbia play Army. That's what made me think of Army with when Ike was president, and he sat on one side of the field for one half because he had been president of Columbia, and he sat on the other side of the field for the other side because he was President Eisenhower. Yep. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and the book will be released on September 1st. And I interviewed a lot of the great coaches. I interviewed men like Lou Holtz, Urban Meyer, Tom Osborne, Mac Brown, Steve Spurrier, Jim Tressel, Phil Fulmer of Tennessee. Many a great coach who talked about how their tactics, how they leadership skills. And I interviewed a lot of players, some former Heisman Trophy winners, like Pete Dawkins of Army, who was the Heisman Trophy winner.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That goes back to my days when Joe Bellino played at Navy. Pete Dawkins was a big star, and the Army had what they called the lonely end back in those days.
And Pete Dawkins told me all about it. He broke it all down for me. Hey, how the signaling system, what it was all about. When you get my book, he talks about the signaling system. How did Bill Carpenter got the signals, what direction to go, all those little tricks and all of that. It was a fantastic interview. Johnny Rogers of Nebraska, talked about Bob Devaney. I had a couple of Leroy Jordan, the old Dallas Cowboy, talked about old Bear Bryant, I had a guy talk to me about the late Joe Paterno. I talked to Lou Holtz. Ron Calcagni talked about how Arkansas beat Oklahoma in the '78 Orange Bowl. Just some great moments. We talked about that. Some old Oklahoma Sooners talked about the late Bud Wilkinson in the '50s. When Oklahoma had that 47-game winning streak. Talked to old three.
Yes, and LSU had the Chinese Bandits back in those days.
That's right. Yeah. I was before I was born, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. Everything was to everybody I talk to now. It was before I was born, but I have the privilege of reaching this age and accumulating memories, and still remember them. So I'm not complaining about anything. And besides, 72 is the new 71.
Beautiful, man.
So. Looking at it that way. Which of those college coaches do you admire? Their records notwithstanding, I'm talking from a human being standpoint. Who do you admire from those coaches you mentioned? A bevy of them. Who do you admire as a human being?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
And if I had been a football player, I think I would have loved Bobby Dodd, the late Bobby Dodd, who coached at Georgia Tech from 45 to 1966. He was a guy. Now, Georgia Tech was no football factory, even though they had a great football tradition. There was not a football factory, and Bobby Dodd had to make do with very little. He couldn't really get superstar players, because of the rigorous academic standards, but he was able to make more with less than all the coaches, and he was like a father figure to his players. I talked to three of his players, and he said he was like a daddy to us all. I mean, he was not brutal. I mean, he worked him hard, but he was never brutal. He's very human and humane. I mean, if I had been a football player, I think I would love to have played for Bobby Dodd. He was imaginative. He won with guile and trickery. Not like Nick Saban, where he's got all the horses. He's got the big guys. He's got four deep in all positions, and they just overwhelm everybody. It's not even a contest or anything like that. Dodd was like a David, always taking on the Goliaths and doing quite well with it. He had a magnificent bowl record. Another coach that I really liked when I talked to him was Tom Osborne in Nebraska. I mean, I didn't meet him in the flesh. All of my interviews were by telephone. But when I spoke to him on the phone, his moral strength just really leaped out through the telephone wires. I mean, this man, you knew this man was born to lead. And he was one of those guys, you instinctively do what he says, not because he's bullying or intimidating you, but because he's got that natural aura of command where you just say, what can I do to help you, coach? You want him to be your next door neighbor. You want him working for your company. You want him in your foxhole if you're fighting a war or something like that. And I remember when I talked to one of his players, Mark Schnellen, who played with him from 80 to 83, I mentioned that. I told him that was the impressions I got. He said, I'm not surprised. That's Coach Osborne. That's him to a T. And he really impressed me, Osborne. I mean, and he's the man. He never tooted his own horn, a man of great modesty. And yet, when you get and read my book, Ralph, I mean, he ranks very, very high up there. I mean, it shocked me when I was doing the calculations. But when you think about it, it doesn't surprise me at all. But he was a great one, Tom Osborne.
Okay, I'll ask this. Who wouldn't you send your kid to for coaching?
Well, he's dead now, but no way. Frank Kush of Arizona State. He's the guy who put Arizona State on the college football map. He's the reason why Arizona State joined what is now the Pac-12. But man, he was scary. He was scary. If you joined him, there wasn't a beating you were not going to take. You were going to take a beating, my friend. You were going to take a beating. It was. I talked to a couple of his players, man. He said, yeah, you had to face it. You had to take pain, man. You had to take it. No chance. No choice. You had to take it.
Well, I wonder if you heard anything about the relationship that Reggie Jackson had with him.
Yeah, he played a season with Kush. That's the thing about Kush. I interviewed his son, Danny, and he said his father loved to recruit multi-sport athletes, and Reggie Jackson was not only a great baseball player, he could play good football too. And Kush said if he had focused on football, he said Reggie could have made it to the NFL, and I don't doubt that for a moment.
No.
He was
big-shouldered and fast. Once he got up ahead of steam, he was very fast.
And that's another aspect of Frank Kush's program, because Danny Kush told me, he said, Dad, speed, constant speed. And Fair Hooker, a wide receiver with the Cleveland Browns, came from ASU. He said, absolute speed. Everyone could fly, from the running backs to the wide receivers. He said he always wanted speed on the football field. So that was an aspect of the Arizona State program.
Beautiful. What would you like to talk about? Because we're running short on time, and what would you like to get in there? Because I'm going to have you back as much more of a regular. You were on a couple of weeks ago with George Grimm, who he's talking hockey. You are the most versatile guy. And by the way, to everybody out there listening, good vibes go out, and please help with those vibes. For George, he's got some serious eye problems going right now. And we just hope for the best. That's all you can do.
I just want to say this. You're seeing this spate of anti-Semitic attacks. Fortunately, the police have been nipping these in the bud. But I just want to remind people, in 11 days, we're coming up on the 80th anniversary of World War II, when the Germans invaded Poland. That was the day they invaded Poland. And with this rise of overt anti-Semitism and the intent of committing anti-Semitic massacres, and we're coming up on the 80th anniversary of World War II, it's painful to contemplate that we are not learned the lessons that were brought on by World War II, where you saw mass extermination of Jewish peoples, simply because they were Jews. And you're seeing this now, 80 years, and history is repeating itself. And
it is. We talked 6 months ago, and I thought the analogy was, how can you analyze what's going on today to what happened back then and this, that? No, this guy, I apologize to you because I was slow on the uptake. This guy is brutal. It's like his manifesto is right out of Mein Kampf.
Right. I know. And there's so many people willing to work towards the Fuhrer. I mean, this is what we are seeking. This is what we are seeing with these killers. They are working towards the Fuhrer. And if you want to create an atmosphere, a fascist coup as possible, this destabilization of society, that's the way to go about doing it. Now, I don't think these are all isolated incidents. I think, I mentioned this earlier today in Facebook, this is a part of a greater evil design. And I think we are seeing this evil design. It's happening right now, and I think, and it's going to get worse as the months pass. In fact, I got a prediction I want to make. I think the day after Election Day 2020, I think you're going to see an enormous widespread pogrom throughout the country, regardless of the result of the election, because if Trump loses, and I hope to God he does lose, then it will be in retaliation for his loss and quite possibly the prelude to a fascist coup. Or if, oh, God save us, I hope this doesn't happen. If he actually wins re-election, then it will happen anyway, because what that means is the gloves are coming off. Democracy is dead, and that means all his enemies are human targets, marked for death, and we are all in a lot of trouble. And
he's got our names and addresses. They've got it on the computer.
Yeah. I know, but we got to speak out anyway. We can't remain silent. I mean, Ralph, you and I, we must not remain silent. What is it Edmund Burke once said? For evil to triumph, it is required that the good do nothing. And we've got to do something, Ralph. We've got to bear witness. We've got to warn people. We've got to get the word out, and we've got to get organized, and we've got to get rid of these people. We've got to vote them out. We've got to get rid of these people.
Oh, we got to vote him out, and got to hope to hell that he doesn't just say, well, I'm discounting the election. I'm making a presidential this, that, and the other thing. We're at war or something.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, literally, our lives and our freedoms and our future, it lies in the balance here, and we've got to do everything we can to put a stop to it somehow, somewhere, some way. We've got to educate the people. We've got to educate children. We've got to warn people, and we got to do our duty as human beings to save humanity and prevent a new dark age. Because what was it Churchill said in their finest hour speech? He said, now, we're seeing the dawn of a new dark age, with the Nazis on the run and all of that. And we got to put a stop to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Matthew, I'm going to end the show the way I generally do, and I hope this helps along the lines that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I implore everybody out there to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children out of recruiting stations, military recruiting stations, and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. Now, that should help everyone.
Yep.
Best I could do for an old guy. I think I've said it. I've said it clearly. Please keep coming back, Matthew.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to come back.
Good. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Adios.
Adios.